All right. Today's Monday, and that would mean a band pick of the week. And the band pick of the week is Lords of Atlantis. Anybody heard of Lords of Atlantis?
Is that Progressic's band?
Yes. Dr. Progressic's band. It's this new band. They have YouTube out there. I don't think they've got an album, but they do have a YouTube video. So you might want to go ahead and check out Lords of Atlantis. All right. Last time we finished externalities, and we started to talk about a pure public good. Right, and we've said this more than once, but what are the characteristics of a pure public good? Okay, and I want, again, obviously, if you've looked at the old exams, you'll see that I will oftentimes ask you questions about that. But first of all, they're non-rival in consumption, we said. And what that means is my consumption of it doesn't affect yours, all right? So if we add one more person to the community or to the country, national defense doesn't go down for the rest of us, okay? Or watching fireworks or whatever. Second is that they're difficult to exclude. And of course, we noted that if you're trying to get to a Pareto-optimal state, then it wouldn't make sense to exclude somebody, right? Because I could make them better off by letting them use the good, and no one else becomes worse off. So I would want to go ahead and allow them to come in. And then the third odd thing is that we all get the same amount. So we all get the same amount of national defense, or we all get the same amount of fireworks, or we all get the same amount of broadcast television, etc. So markets, they still manage, it turns out, to produce some public goods. There's a famous paper by Coase, same guy that, Ronald Coase, that we talked about the Coase theorem, and one, a paper that he pointed out, which is in the public goods folder in your ECON 402 folder, his little paper there is about a lighthouse. And he shows that lighthouses have that same characteristic. That is, if there's a lighthouse out there warning your ship about, some sort of rocks or whatever, then it's got that sort of same characteristic. My ship isn't going to, block your ship from seeing the lighthouse. We all get the same amount of lighthouse, view, and it's difficult to exclude people, ships that are going by from seeing it. But it turns out that they had a mechanism that the private sector produced lighthouses. So it's an interesting little paper. But again, if you think back to the early days of broadcast television, that was another example. That is, when I put my antenna up and ABC sent the signal out, right? They didn't have a mechanism to exclude me from getting the ABC, ABC News or I Love Lucy or whatever was coming over, and everybody got the same amount of I Love Lucy, right? And my watching I Love Lucy didn't make your I Love Lucy go down a little bit. So it had those characteristics, but we figured out a way to do it. And of course, the way to do that was you had a half-hour television show. There is a private good that was part of that, which is time on the television show. And so what did we do? We had advertising. Right? So advertising was a mechanism. You paid to get your advertisement on the I Love Lucy show, and that allowed ABC to be able to pay for the resources to send the thing out. So there's mechanisms for the private sector to do that, but generally pure public goods are going to have the characteristic that the government is going to end up producing them. Now, you know, also, if you sort of look at it, all these things are sort of on a scale. That is, some things, I mean, all these characteristics, there's, you know, if you sort of think of a scale, if you had a pure private good, right, over here, and you had a public good, pure public good over here, they sort of lie along that line. That is, what about a roadway at 2 o'clock in the morning? Okay, let's say it's a interstate on, you know, going into Los Angeles or going into New York or something at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's 6 lanes wide, right? Then it has a little bit of that characteristic, right? I mean, my driving on the roadway at 2 o'clock in the morning probably isn't going to keep you from driving on the roadway or slow you down. It would be expensive to have people pay every mile or every half a mile to set up to exclude people. And we all get the same amount of roadway, right? But as we move towards 5 o'clock in the afternoon, then you can see that you get crowding, right? So my getting on the freeway or my getting on the roadway or my getting on the bridge or whatever it is going to slow you down. It's going to so my consumption of it does affect your consumption of it. And it might be, you know, we'll figure out, of course, we figure out ways to charge you for it, right? Anybody ever got an Easy Pass? Okay, yeah. Okay, well, what does that do? You know, you can just shoot by, right? And you don't have to stop or if you do stop, it doesn't take very long to go through it. And so they'll have Easy Pass lanes. So the technology is figuring out a way to make it so that, well, it's less costly to exclude people. And so you can think of all these characteristics, whether it's difficult to exclude or non-rival or we all get the same amount of it, those things tend to be on a continuum from a purely public good to a purely private good. And later on we're going to look at goods that we call club goods that Buchanan wrote a famous paper on, and we'll talk about club goods where you can, you know, form a club to do it, like a swimming pool, and again we'll talk about how might determine the optimal amount of a club good. And how many people to be in the club, but we'll talk more about that. But they're goods that will have this congestion effect to it. Once we start adding people, you know, if you've got this big swimming pool at the beginning, you know, my swimming in it doesn't affect your swimming in it. But as we get more and more people, it has this congestion effect. All right. Now, if we look at oops, one of these things. If we look at the market demand for a purely private good, just to think back to ECON 202 or, is this not working too well? Let me put the phone here. If we look at the demand for a private good, and let's say we had person one's demand and persons two's demand and persons three demand. Okay. And remember the demand curve of individuals is their marginal benefit curve, right? So if we put price here and quantity here, at say $5, then person one's going to demand Q1, person two is going to demand Q2, person three is going to demand Q3. And so how did you get the market demand, right? You added the demand curves horizontally. Right? So the market demand, you add the demand curves horizontally. So if this were, let's say, we'll just give an example. Suppose this is 3, and this is 5, and this is 6. So at $5, the first person will demand 3, the second person will demand 5, and the third person will demand 6. What do you get? You get 15 out here, right? So the market demand is going to be D1 plus D2 plus D3 as you add that away. So at 5, what's going to happen? You're going to have 15 as the market demand. And notice that each individual, their marginal benefit is equal to the price, right? Because what did they do? You adjust your quantity to make that happen. We all face the same price, and we adjust the quantity. So we all face the same price, and what do? We adjust the quantity until the market marginal benefit is equal to the price. Notice that if we're talking about club sandwiches, then the last club sandwich, only one person gets it, right? Because it's rival in consumption. My eating that club sandwich, you can't eat the same club sandwich at the same time. So that last club sandwich that got consumed had that marginal benefit was just equal to the price. But if we have a pure public good, in a pure public good, then it's a little bit different, right? Because let's say we put dollars here and we put quantity here, and we have the first person, if we look at Q, as we increase the quantity of the public good, whether it's, let's say it's national defense, okay? So we're increasing the quantity of the pure public good. This person's marginal benefit, let's say the first person will have the marginal benefit of that person one's right there, right? So they have this little bit of marginal benefit if, what do? We assume diminishing marginal benefits like we always do, right? So you got diminishing marginal benefits. So as you increase the amount of the pure public good, national defense, person one's marginal benefit's declining. They get a higher marginal benefit as you start from 0. Now suppose that we have the marginal benefit of the second person that looks like this. All right? So the second person's marginal benefit is there, and we have a third marginal benefit, which is here. So these are the marginal benefit of 3 people. Right? So you have 3 people in the world of where we're providing this national defense. But if you think about it, then if we look at, let's say we start out with 3 units of national defense, my consumption of it doesn't affect yours. So the marginal benefit looks like this, right? So this is, we'll put MB1 here for the 3 units, and then, but this person gets more marginal benefit, and they don't lose any marginal benefit from the first person being there, right? Because everybody gets the same amount of it, right? And it's non-rival. So if we produce 3 units of national defense, person 1 gets 3 units of national defense, person 2 gets 3 units of national defense, person 3 gets 3 units of national defense, right? It's not like sandwiches. You know, I get the sandwich, you don't get to eat the same sandwich, right? We don't have 3 people all eating the same sandwich, but we can have 3 people all getting the same amount of national defense. So we all get the same amount. Right? We all get the same amount of national defense. So if I were to add up the marginal benefit to society from national defense, I'm going to add it up this direction. Okay? So if this is MB2 and this is MB3, then the marginal benefit up here, if we put it for the total amount of marginal benefit, what's that equal to? Marginal benefit of the total is equal to the marginal benefit of the first person plus marginal benefit of the second person plus marginal benefit of the third person. So if we were to add up the marginal benefits of everybody and we were to look then, where should what would the marginal benefit of society looks like, the marginal benefit of the three people, it's going to look like this. Right? So this is going to be marginal benefit of 1 plus marginal benefit of 2 plus marginal benefit of 3. So if you were to draw, in a sense, the demand curve for a pure public good, you're going to add it up. You're going to add it up vertically, not horizontally, right? And when you took 202 or 303 or whatever, you're adding up those demand curves this direction because we're all pacing the same price and we're differing our quantity. Here we're all getting the same amount. And so if we think of what's our marginal benefit at each point, we're all getting a different amount of the marginal benefit for the pure public good. So we're going to add that in the public good, the pure public good, right? You're going to add it vertically. So what would the optimal amount be? Well, if you think you keep doing things as long as the added benefit is bigger than the added cost, there is a cost to producing national defense, right? There's a cost to producing the public good, and that's going to look like this. Okay? So if we have a marginal cost of that public good, and again, it's crucial to recall that it costs more to produce the next unit, right? It doesn't cost any more to have one more person consuming it, but it always costs more to produce the next unit. If I'm making a bigger amount of national defense, it costs something to produce more of the national defense. And we assume increasing marginal costs, just like we do for everything else. So we've got increasing marginal costs where what's the optimal amount? The optimal amount here is going to be where the marginal cost to society is equal to the marginal benefit to society, right? That would be Q star. At Q star, the marginal cost is equal to what? It's equal to the sum of the marginal cost equals the sum of the marginal benefits over all the people. I equals 1 to n. Okay? So the optimal amount of a pure public good occurs where the sum of the marginal benefits equals the marginal cost. And this is called the Samuelson condition. The Samuelson condition occurs where the sum of the marginal benefits is just equal to the marginal cost. And that's from a paper which is a 1954 paper, which is on your syllabus, a pure theory of public expenditure. This was, Paul Samuelson. He wrote that paper in 1954. And so if I were to produce the optimal amount of pure public good, how do I know how much national defense to produce? If I knew everybody's individual demand curves for the pure public good, for national defense, if I knew what your marginal benefit was as we went from 0 units to an infinite amount of national defense, if I knew that, I could take everybody's at every unit of national defense, I'd take everybody's marginal benefits, I'd add them up, and I'd get what the total marginal benefit was, and I would go to the point where the sum of the marginal benefits equals the marginal cost. Yeah.
What was that paper called?
It's called a pure theory of public expenditure. Again, it's on your syllabus. It was a paper that was I forget what journal it was in, but again, it's on your syllabus. It's the pure theory of public expenditure. So again, if we're looking at what's the optimum amount of the pure public good to provide, what's going on? The point is that we all get the same amount, so we can't adjust quantity. Right? So you can't adjust quantity. So what's going on in a purely private good is we're all going to have the same marginal benefit because we're all going to go to where the price, which is the marginal cost of us, is equal to the marginal benefit. And if you could again think back to ECON 202, what do we know? We know that everybody has the same marginal benefits. And when we talked about efficiency, what did we know? We know in a perfect competitive market, what do we have? The marginal rate of substitution is the same for everybody. Why is the marginal rate of substitution the same for everybody? Because we're all utility maximizers. We're all setting our margin utility equal to the price. We're all facing the same price ratio. So our marginal rate of substitution, that first condition of Pareto efficiency, the margin rates of substitution have to be the same for everybody. That occurs because we all face the same price ratio, but we adjust Q. You can't do that here, right? We're all going to get the same amount. So mechanically, how do you make that happen? That's, again, very hard to do, right? If you were President Biden and you knew the marginal benefit curves for everybody in the United States, then you could add them all up, right? And you'd figure out what's the added cost of the next unit of national defense. And so you'd have your marginal cost curve for national defense. You'd go to where the sum of the marginal benefits equals the marginal cost. Now, as we've said lots of times, is that possible to do? Probably not, right? But it gives you some idea about, we at least know what the optimal amount of any pure public good is. We conceptually know what we ought to be headed. So if we have a general idea of what people's preferences are for national defense, then we would be able to maybe decide, well, maybe we shouldn't have $3 trillion in national defense spending. Maybe we should only have $1 trillion in national defense spending. You'll get some sort of idea about where you ought to be headed. Now, in 1919, Eric Lindahl wrote a paper, which was an interesting paper, pretty much in a sense foreshadowing what Samuelson was going to do in 1954. That is, and I put the Lindahl paper in the public goods folder. So again, it's on the references on your syllabus. But I did put the Lindahl paper in your public in the public goods subfolder of your of the Econ 402 subfolder in Box. All right. So Eric Lindahl, okay, wrote this paper in 1919, and it's called a Just Taxation, and what this is really about is a public good. If you had a public good, and how could you tax it so that it was efficient? It was just in some sense. Well, what he suggested was that suppose that we have a marginal cost for a pure public good. And at the time, he didn't talk about pure public good, but if you read the paper, clearly he's thinking along the same lines. And again, if you in the textbook, this is around page 145, 146 in the textbook as well. But if you look at this, he said, well, what if we knew what the sum of the marginal benefits were? So this would be the optimal amount of the pure public good to produce. What would be a just taxation and a positive solution to this thing? Well, what if this was the marginal benefit of person 1, right? And this was the marginal benefit of person 2, and this was the marginal benefit of person 3, right? And they add up to that sum of the marginal benefit curve. So what we did was we said, let's figure out where the optimal amount is, Q star, and the Lindahl, what we call a Lindahl tax, we're going to charge you an amount for the pure public good, basically a price for the pure public good, and we're going to charge you a price, and that price is going to be what your marginal benefit is at that point. So if we did this, we said, okay, this is person's 1 tax per unit, this is person 2's tax per unit, and this is person 3's tax per unit. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to charge a tax equal to your marginal benefit at the point where the sum of the marginal benefits is equal to the marginal cost. Now, Lindahl, if you look at his paper, it doesn't look exactly like this because he's really talking about there's only like 2 people or whatever. But you know, the point is he was thinking ahead of his time, and what he just basically said, if you translate that into after Samuelson has written the paper in 54, so to translate that idea, if everybody got taxed on a per unit basis, the marginal benefit to them at where the sum of the marginal benefits equals the marginal cost, notice that if we were to vote on whether we ought to have more or less of the pure public good, notice that each person would agree that the optimal amount is Q star, right? If somehow I knew your marginal benefit curve, and that was the only way we could get to where the sum of the marginal benefits equals the marginal cost. So I assume we know everybody's marginal benefit curve. Then what will happen is we'll add all those up. We'll get the sum of the marginal benefits. We'll go to where the sum of the marginal benefits equals the marginal cost. That gives us the optimal amount of the pure public good. And then we're going to tax everybody, their marginal benefit at that point, right, where that optimal point at Q star, right? And that's at Q star. So notice that if we looked at person 1 and we said, hey, do you want some more or less of the pure public good, right? Person 1 notice that if their tax price is T1, right? So if I were to say, hey, do you want less than Q star? Then what would happen is person 1's marginal benefit for all those units, let's say we picked QL, so for some lower amount, right? So as we pick QL, and we look at person 1, right? They'd want more of Q, right? Because why? Because at QL, the marginal benefit is less than their tax price, right? The T is the tax that they're paying per unit. So if you're person one and we said, oh, okay, we're going to produce that much of the pure public good, would you be happy with that? You'd say, no, I'd like some more, right? Because if we sort of look at what I should have been straight here. If I look at what my tax price is, all those units from QL to Q star, they all have a marginal benefit which is bigger than their tax price. What's going on? The marginal benefit to person one is bigger than their tax price. So they'd want to have more, okay? But if you look at person two, similarly, right? If we look at person two, they're going to have a tax, if they were there, person two, what's their marginal benefit at QL? Their marginal benefit is up here. And so for all the units between here and here, from QL to Q star, their marginal benefit's above their tax price. And if we look at person three, their tax price is here, right? At QL, their marginal benefit is bigger than their tax price. So for each person, from QL to Q star, their marginal benefit is bigger than their tax price. So nobody would want to be at a point less than Q star. But if you sort of think about it, you're going to have the same situation. What happens if you pick a point which is larger than Q star? Let's say we draw this again, and we have marginal cost looks like this, and we have D1, or well, MB1, MB2, MB3, and we have that the sum of the marginal benefits is up there, right? So there's our Q star. Well, if I picked, and of course then everybody's tax price is there. That's tax price for person one, tax price for person two, tax price for person three. Again, these are tax per unit. If you somehow measure the national defense in units somehow, then what's going to go on is that if we pick a point at, we'll call it QH, what's going to happen? QH, for each person, the tax price is going to be bigger than their marginal benefit, right? So if we picked QH, just looking at person one, for all those units, their tax price is up here, right? But their marginal benefit is down there. So for all those people, right, their tax price is up here, but their marginal benefit is along there. So all the units between Q star and QH are going to have a tax price which is bigger than the marginal benefit, right? So then they're not going to want that. So, right, they won't want a Q greater than Q star. Well, basically Lindahl's point then is if you could figure out everybody's marginal benefit curves, you could add up all the marginal benefits, get to where the sum of the marginal benefits equal the marginal cost, come down there and charge everybody a tax per unit, which is just equal to their marginal benefit at where Q star is, and then you'd have unanimous agreement, right? So what we do then is we get, with a Lindahl pricing, if we had a Lindahl tax, what happens? You get unanimous agreement at Q star. So notice what's going on is that everybody, in a purely private good, what happens is you all face the same price, and then you adjust what your Q is. Okay? But you can't adjust your Q with a pure public good. So if we're to make things optimal, what do we need to do? We need to adjust the price. Basically, that's what's going on, right? We're adjusting the price. In this case, your price per unit is the tax per unit. So rather than everybody having a different amount at the same price, which is what you have in a purely private good, what do you get? Everybody gets the same amount, but everybody's going to face a different price. So if you wanted to get to a unanimous solution, then you would get to a Lindahl pricing, or a Lindahl tax would give you a unanimous solution. Now, obviously there's an incentive to misreveal in this case. If what we said was, okay, do you want more or do you want less, right? There's an obviously, if what's going to happen is you're going to be, how are we going to get you to tell me what your demand curve is? That's basically the thing, right? Because if you know that your tax price is going to depend on your marginal benefit, why would you tell the person that you want it? You could say, I don't want it at all, right? You're the only one that does that, okay? Right? You have an incentive to misreveal what your marginal benefit curve looks like, right? Because if you say, I don't want any of it, right? I don't want national defense, okay? If you say, you don't want national defense at all, what will you get? You'll get whatever the national defense is, right? Because what's going to happen is the government's going to look at, the sum of the marginal benefits. You're not going to be in there, right? Because your marginal benefit's zero everywhere, okay? So marginal cost is here. This is some of the marginal benefits without you. And your true, this is your true marginal benefit here. Well, what will happen is if we added u to it, right, we'd get some amount that's out here. This is the sum of the marginal benefits with u. Well, what's going to happen, right? This is QY, Q with U in it. This is QW, Q without you. What'll happen is the government won't know what your marginal benefit really is, so what's going to happen? You're going to get QW, and you're not going to have to pay for it at all, right? So if you don't have to pay for it at all, you're probably better off, because if you think there's 300 million people that we're adding up, right? We're adding up the sum of the marginal benefits. Your addition to the sum of the marginal benefits might be relatively small, so the change in Q might not be very much, and you're going to get that for free, okay? So if you say you don't want national defense at all, what will happen is you'll end up with QW being produced instead of QY, but you're going to get 0 to QW, oops, you're going to get 0 to QW without having to pay for it. So everybody's going to have an incentive to misreveal if this is the way we do it, okay? So again, there's a a theoretical answer to this, which is nice, right? If we add up everybody's marginal benefit curves, and then we go to where marginal benefit equals marginal cost, that's going to be the optimal amount of the public good. If we charge everybody their tax price where their marginal benefit hits where their marginal benefit is at the optimal amount of the pure public good, then everybody will agree that's the optimal amount to do that, right? Everybody will say, I don't want less than that, I don't want more than that. But then the question is, how do you get people to reveal their preference, right? Again, it's a matter of just, we know the general direction of things, okay? We know that, when we were talking about externalities, right? I want to charge people their marginal external cost. How do I know what that is? Hard to do, okay? But we at least have an idea, well, maybe a carbon tax is a way to do that. Here, if we somehow had an idea of people's preferences, and let's say you knew that this subgroup had a different preference than this other subgroup, then maybe we want to charge the people that are in the one subgroup more than the people that are in the other subgroup. Okay? Again, there's going to be some sort of trade-off between efficiency and equity. Okay? So there's, again, all these problems with actual implementing these things. But the important point is that you at least know what the optimal answer is, okay? And you'll know, okay, maybe sometimes we just know what it is, right? Well, it'll be obvious that, again, using the example, it'll be obvious that the people on, US 12 value the right to cross that corner more than the people on Milnes Road. And maybe that, let's say, people who have lots of stuff would prefer to have a higher protection of private property rights, okay? Because they've got lots of stuff to lose. And if you're a person that doesn't have anything, living, out in a homeless shelter or something like that, maybe you don't care too much because you don't have stuff to be taken. So what we might do is tax the people who are wealthier more than the people who aren't, and then maybe that would make it so you have both an efficiency and an equity argument working in the same direction. Another idea of how might we figure out what the amount of taxation should be and how much of a public good to produce is a paper by Vixel. And he wrote this in 1896. And his paper is called A New Principle of Just Taxation. A New Principle of Just Taxation. And he influenced Buchanan. If you've had public choice, we talked about Buchanan and Wagner's famous book, The Calculus of Consent. And we talk about, in public choice, we talk about what's the optimal majority on different issues, et cetera. And Vixel had an influence on Buchanan's work in this area. And there's a discussion of this on page 176 in the textbook, which is you'll notice that there's some discussion of these things in the section that he calls public choice in that chapter. So we're not reading that chapter by itself, but if you look in that section or on page 176, you'll see a little discussion of what Vixel was talking about. Now, also, the Lindahl discussion is in around page 145, 146 in the textbook, if you're reading through the textbook here. again, he pointed out that a private sector, if we look at the private sector, what happens with the private sector? You get unanimity. Unanimity, right? You get unanimity in the private sector by what? Okay, people adjust, we just talked about this, people adjust the quantity, right? We have unanimous agreement on, how many Arby's roast beef sandwiches they're going to buy, right? Because you keep buying Arby's roast beef sandwiches until the marginal benefit to you of an Arby's roast beef sandwich is equal to the price, right? So we, in a sense, we all have unanimous agreement in this stuff. But the problem, as we've pointed out, in a pure public good is you can't adjust what the Q is. And so we need to have some choice of how much we're going to pay and how much we're going to get. And we noted that one way to do that is if somehow you knew everybody's marginal benefit. Les Lindahl said, if you knew everybody's marginal benefits curve, then what we could do is we could add them up. We could get to where the sum of the marginal benefits equals the marginal cost. We charge everybody a tax per unit just equal to their marginal benefit. And I forgot one point here. If you notice that if you have constant marginal costs, right? If this marginal cost curve looks like this, just this up here. If you have constant marginal cost, you'll notice that the amount that it costs, we'll call this P, I don't know, dollars here. We'll call this PT, okay? If we have constant marginal cost, then what's going to happen is that the sum of the marginal benefits, right, hits here, and notice that, what is that? That's adding up everybody's marginal benefits, but what are you doing? You're adding up everybody's tax price, okay? So that if what's going on here, okay, and that's the optimal amount here, if we add all that up, what's going to happen? Tax times Q, what's that going to be equal to? That's going to be equal to the cost of producing the good, right? If the marginal cost is constant, what's the cost of producing QY, right? If constant marginal cost, then the taxes collected are going to be equal to the cost of production. Because the sum of those MB1s, or sum of those marginal benefits, are going to be the sum of the taxes, and the sum of the taxes is times the quantity is going to be the total tax collection, and so the total cost is going to be the marginal cost here times the quantity. So what's going to happen is the total revenue that you're getting from the taxes is going to be equal to the total tax collection. Now, notice that's not the purpose of collecting the tax, right? The purpose of collecting the tax is to make it so that everybody is happy at what at whatever that per unit is. All right? So what we're going to do for Wednesday is we will do VXL. We'll also do the Clark tax, and we will do the Bowen majority vote. And that one is, the Bowen is on page 160 in chapter 5 of Hyman. And we may get into the Buchanan theory of clubs. Okay? So basically, you might as well go ahead and finish the chapter on pure public goods.